Joining me now is Dr. Deepa Verma. She is from Synergistic Integrative Health, and we're talking about plant-based diets today.
Yep.
So, the plant-based diet thing is kind of an odd thing. There's so many different titles. Is that vegan? Is it sort of vegan? Give us a little first of what that actually means.
Yeah, so there's a lot of confusion sometimes when people are talking about plant-based diet because they want to know the distinction. Is it vegan? Is it vegetarian? Can I have a little fish? There are the nuances there. So when you're saying plant-based diet, it's really eliminating the meat and the dairy from there and really just concentrating on sources, on food that's really just coming from plants. So we're talking about fruits and vegetables and beans and legumes and, grains and stuff like that. So I try not to use those other terms because you can kind of nitpick. If you're vegan, you truly shouldn't be touching or doing anything that's, animal related. So plant-based, I like to use that, we can use that term.
Sure, so we can kind of interpret it any way we want at that point.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of science behind this. Before we were always looking at people who ate plants versus animals. There was like an emotional component on it. But now we're really talking about the scientific component that there's a lot of benefits for this. So go backwards a little bit for us and tell us, if you do eat meat, what happens to the body? And then obviously if we start having the plant-based diets, we start to correct some of those things. So worst case scenario, I'm eating meat, chicken, cheese, cheeseburgers, everything else.
Right.
What's happening to me?
So that standard American diet, which is so, heavily invested in having meat and dairy, that's really how a lot of us grew up. It's, have your meat and potatoes, drink your glass of milk. What they're finding now, so it's not just a belief system. It's not just cruelty to animals. That, when we talk about PETA and all those kind of things, that's part of it. But this is more about now your lifestyle, about how do we reverse chronic diseases. When forks over knives came out several years ago, that really, I think, piqued people's interest and like, wow, when we're looking at these chronic disease processes that are so abundant in America, things like diabetes, obesity, heart disease, inflammation, gut health, even cancer, we started looking at what is causing the rise in these disease processes. So now what we're finding is all the information that we're compiling from the scientific research and everything is that when you have a diet that's high in meat and dairy, we truly have a lot of inflammation going on. And we actually look at what happens when we stop eating meat and dairy. We actually reverse heart disease. They've done studies where they've done imaging of the vessels and actually looked at plaque regression. Your weight plummets or drops. This is a great way for people to lose weight, and you reduce your risk of diabetes. We actually also turn off genes that are mutated. It's basically epigenetic. So when I tell people your genetic traits are like light switches, we turn genes on or off. So when we're smoking, drinking a lot, when we have poor lifestyle, we're basically flipping all those switches on. And we're now increasing the risk to develop cancer and heart disease and obesity. So what I'm telling people is our bodies are not actually designed to have or consume meat and dairy. We need actually more plant-based diet. We're not made like carnivores. And that's a whole other topic, but just in terms of our gut health and the way our body processes things, we cannot eat red raw meat. We can't eat that. We have to cook our meat. And when you cook your meat, you're actually changing the structure of meat. You're increasing the carcinogens in there. Same with dairy. As mammals, if we look at all the other mammals in the animal kingdom, they actually stop drinking milk after they're done drinking from the mother. But we are the only mammals that continue to drink milk. And at that, we're drinking from another species. So when I tell my patients that lactose intolerance is normal, they're kind of surprised. But I'm like, well, we're human. We're not baby cows.
Right.
So, and on top of that, the amount of antibiotics and growth hormones, all that's injected into the meat and dairy has now created all these disease processes. We're seeing precocious puberty. We're seeing hormonal imbalances. So it's such a great way to really live clean and to just reverse disease. You're being proactive, not reactive.
Sure. Now let's talk about that gut health, because that's something that's a hotter topic now. We're talking about probiotics. We're looking at ways to change the gut. But if we just avoided those foods to start with, we wouldn't need probiotics. We wouldn't need to have that change. So if I eat meat, in the stomach, they produce certain things that cause diseases to show up more. Talk about that a little bit.
So when we're eating meat, the type of gut flora that we need to digest it, we don't really have. So you're just shifting the whole microbiome. So we get what we call dysbiosis. We have leaky gut. We have inflammation. We have the rise of these like disease process IBD. We call them inflammatory bowel disease and IBS. And when you're eating meat, because we can't digest it, it's sitting in the gut longer. You have a piece of cooked, rotting meat, basically, that's not being digested and moving through because our gut is so long. So you're just changing the whole structure of that. And when that happens, then you now increase the risk for leaky gut. That increases the risk for inflammatory diseases because now what's happening is what's supposed to stay in the gut is not. It's going back into the body and now setting off a chain reaction. So having a diet that's going to be beneficial to your digestion and those processes. Your gut health is basically your second brain. And when we destroy that connection, and when we destroy the gut-brain connection, we're now affecting things on not just a physical level, but a mental level. And there's a lot of links to, you know, depression, and even autism, anxiety, bipolar. So if we ruin that gut health by the diet we consume, now we have to look at the array of disease processes that are going on a mental and physical level.
Sure. Now we talk about the way that things come into our body. We obviously swallow everything. So that gut health is basically, as you said, the second brain, and it starts or blocks disease patterns as much as possible.
Right.
So when we take plant-based in, benefits of that obviously is that it's friendlier. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, when someone says I'm going plant-based, one of the burning questions is, well, where are you getting all your protein from? Where are you getting your nutrients from? Scientific research has shown there is no way you can actually become deficient in any of vitamins, minerals, and, you know, protein, calcium, iron with plant-based deficiency. They're myths. It's like, oh, you're vegan, you're going to be B12 deficient. B12 actually comes from the soil. It comes from plants. And when we're eating animals, and when carnivores eat animals, we're really eating plant-based animals, because plants actually have the most perfect source of protein that our body can digest. More calcium and iron. And one of the new superfoods that are actually coming into the limelight now is moringa. And moringa is actually a plant-based, it's a food, it's a superfood. It was actually voted one of the most like influential plants, I think, in 2008. It's actually coming really, really strong, and it has all the nutrients, it has all the protein, calcium, potassium. It's phenomenal. It's an Ayurvedic plant actually that's actually grown in India, and you can use, you know, the leaves of it, you can use that, and people are using that kind of as like how they use matcha powder. And that is your most perfect form of nutrition, actually. So we're looking at all these different ways. You know, I think lentils and legumes are all underestimated. So when we're looking at this, we have to understand, you don't really hear of a diagnosis called protein deficiency. Plants actually have so much protein and calcium and iron, and they have it in the way that our body can consume it, and that's the key, and that's what I think you're trying to get at, is our body is able to consume it and utilize it and then heal. Food is your medicine. So I tell my patients, food is your safest form of medicine, or it's your slowest form of poison. And even Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine. So if we understand the proper nutrients, macronutrients, because the other part of dieting and losing weight also is, okay, I'm going to do an Atkins diet or ketogenic diet, a low-carb diet. We have to understand the proportions. So by certain testing that I do, you know, whether it's genetic testing, gut health testing, we can actually see what the body needs and how we can reverse disease processes.
Wow. So that sounds like a lot of science behind an emotional start, but when we look at it, if we don't hurt ourselves to begin with, we don't have to overcome things. Medicine only is 30% effective. You know, preventive health is 100% effective. If you're eating foods that are better for you, then your body doesn't have as much breakdown. Great information. Thank you so much for joining us today. Obviously, lots of information. Would be great if we could talk about this for hours and hours.
Yes, absolutely.
This is just a beginning point. Hopefully a lot of our viewers look at this and research it online.
Right. Thank you.